Okay, here is part 7, and here's hoping we finish it today. I've got... how many pages left? 67. Okay, and apparently this is from Fran's perspective. While... I said the first word! That's not a good sign! Meanwhile at the temple. Before me was Lady Rosamond, silently floating in a box containing a light blue potion. Bright red lines streaked across her body. The high priest removed his hands from the concoction, the small ripples on the surface making her hair sway ever so slightly. He wiped his hands on a towel as he stood up, handed the towel to me, then opened the door. I couldn't enter or leave this workshop on my own, so I hurriedly followed him out. He glanced back a single time at the box in which Lady Rosamond was sleeping, then quietly closed the door. And now only I can enter this room, the high priest said. Rosamond is safe. Even if attackers came to the temple, there was nothing they could do to reach her. Only once the high priest knew that she was safe did his expression return to normal. He now looked as he usually did while at work. Fran, if you have any of the letters or memos Rosamond left behind, show them to me. I wish to establish what plans she had for the winter. As you wish. I promptly went to Lady Rosamond's work desk and took out the letters she had written to people. I also gathered the notes she had made for herself. She always copied them from her diptych onto proper paper so as to not forget them, which meant we would not have any issues identifying her immediate plans. It was initially a shock to see her using such expensive paper for mere notes, whether it was ripped or not, but I had since grown used to it. Lady Rosamond felt most at home writing on plant paper, not wooden boards. As I was organizing the letters into those for her noble associates, her temple associates, and her lower city associates, an ordinance flew into the room. It announced that the criminal had been caught, then returned to its yellow face-stone form. The high priest replied, "Very well, I shall return at once," then sent the ordinance back. "Fran, there is work for me to do at the castle," he announced. "I will not return until it is time for the dedication ritual. I entrust the temple to you and my attendants. Use the blue priest as needed to finish the necessary preparations." Oh, he will have to do the dedication ritual by himself. Oh, not really by himself, the most of it by himself. Because he'll have the other blue priests to help, but they won't be able to do near as much as he does. And now that Rosamond's not going to be able to help with that, oh, that's the same for another year now. Jeez. The high priest took the letters for Lady Rosamond's noble associates at once and strode briskly out of the room. Once he was gone, the other attendants, who were supposed to have retired to their rooms for the day, returned to the High Bishop's chambers. "Fran, what did the High Priest say? Is Lady Rosamond going to be okay?" Monica asked, looking up at me with worry. Nicola and Gil waited just as expectantly for my answer. They were all worried about Lady Rosamond being rushed to her workshop so quickly. "He said it is likely she will remain asleep for over a year. The poison she was given has put an unexpected strain on her body." "No way." Everyone looked to be on the verge of tears, but it would be a long time before Lady Rosamond awakened. There was no point in rushing things. "I'll provide some more details tomorrow. It is late and you all need rest." The apprentices returned to their rooms, still unable to accept what had happened, while I also stayed behind. It was my turn on night duty, and as I organized the room before writing a letter for Lutz, who would explain the circumstances to both Lady Rosamond's lower city family and the planting company. I spent the following day having to explain Lady Rosamond's situation again and again. The apprentices were up early, having been unable to sleep out of worry, so I gave them the explanatory letter I had written to Lutz and went for a much-needed nap. Fourth bell rang before I knew it, and when I sat down for lunch, everyone demanded yet more explanations. The high priest had not given me very precise details in the first place, so despite all their questions, there was not much I could say. As Lady Rosamond said previously, please think of this as her staying at the castle for an extended period of time. We have no choice but to continue as if she were simply away. Please resume what you have been doing so that she does not encounter any complications upon her awakening. After finishing lunch, Zom and I organized documents related to Rosamond's work before leaving for the high priest's room. He would need to handle her high bishop work while she was gone. "Will the high priest not collapse at this rate?" I asked worriedly, eyeing the mountain of documents before us. Zom paused for a moment, then shook his head. "I assume he will survive, thanks largely to him taking Lady Rosamond's advice and training other blue priests to help him. I shuddered to imagine a world in which he had not done so. Even if she had done nothing else, this fact alone would have earned her my utmost gratitude. Praise be to the gods." Zom had once served the same blue priest as Fritz, as he had quickly come to appreciate both the high priest's competence and the ease of working beneath him. He had been praising Lady Rosemine for her skill ever since she was an apprentice blue shrine maiden, thankful for her ability to help the high priest with his work. Okay, so Zom and Fritz both served Shikikoza. They are the saints here for having to deal with that asshole. That is for sure. I feel so bad for them. When the time had come to choose one of the high priest's attendants to leave and serve Lady Rosemine, Zom had volunteered sooner than anyone. The food in the high bishop's chambers was of a higher quality, and the greater workload for each attendant made one's contributions feel that much more meaningful. Not to mention that Lady Rosemine taking on more work would ultimately relieve the burden on the high priest. Now then, shall we go? The high priest's attendants will need matters explained to them as well. With that, Zom and I carried the box of documents from the high bishop's chambers to the high priest's chambers. Fran, Zom, we have been waiting for your arrival, one of the attendants said. This shelf has been cleared for you. The high priest must have made arrangements ahead of time, as space had already been cleared for the documents we brought with us. Everyone worked together to organize them and collect information on the events of the previous night, agreeing to do our best to minimize the high priest's burden and select what jobs could be entrusted to the blue priests. Zom, might I ask you to explain the situation to Brothers Camphor and Freetic, I said once the documents were organized. I then headed for the orphanage, and Wilma came rushing over the moment I arrived. Fran, I heard from Monica that Lady Rosemine's going to be asleep for a long time. What will happen to the orphanage, she asked, so worried that her face was sickly pale. All those who knew how terrible the orphanage had been before Lady Rosemine became the orphanage director were deathly afraid of her giving up the position, as this introduced the possibility of things returning to the way they had been before. Everything is going to be fine. Authority over the temple will shift to the high priest while Lady Rosemine's asleep, but I have been instructed to continue overseeing things as I have been. As for the budget, we cannot use Lady Rosemine's guild card, but the high priest is managing the high bishop's payments, and the money she's given for being the archduke's child. So we will surely not lack in that regard. As winter preparations are complete, we will be able to last until spring without issue, as long as we are not wasteful. That is true, Wilma murmured with an understanding nod. I also took it upon myself to assure the worried orphans that we would not run out of money while the workshop continued to operate. I hadn't mentioned this to anyone, but Lady Rosemine had a locked box, her under-the-mattress box as she called it, which also contained a considerable sum. Oh, she's been hoarding money too! Okay, for a rainy day, I guess. These funds would serve as a safety net, hopefully preventing our circumstances from ever becoming too dire. Wilma, those in positions of authority must show neither worry nor panic. Please calm yourself. Lady Rosemine's going to be fine. It's just a matter of time until she wakes up. She's going to be fine, it'll just take time. Forgive me. I will now announce the goals Lady Rosemine wishes to be completed over the winter. The task Lady Rosemine had entrusted the orphanage with last year was for everyone to learn the alphabet, as well as single-digit math. Everyone must have remembered the additional meat they had previously been rewarded with for succeeding, as their concerned gazes soon hardened. This year's task is for everyone to learn the basic knowledge required of an attendant before reaching 10 years of age. Grey priests who have served as attendants will work as teachers. Having learned from the situation with Volk, Lady Rosemine wished to increase the value of all the Grey priests. She would rather they be sold as skilled attendants than lowly servants, since their treatment would vary dramatically based on their position, and servants that were more capable went for far more money. Delia, Lady Rosemine was worried about Dirk, I continued. Please contact me at once should he begin to show any abnormalities. The high priest is exceedingly busy, so his treatment could otherwise be delayed. Understood. Our final task was to go to the workshop, but it became pretty clear pretty soon after I arrived that Gil was putting his all into making books, convinced that they could encourage Lady Rosemine to wake up faster. He did not seem to need my help, and so I simply handed him the letter for Lutz and left. The next day, Lady Rosemine's personnel returned to the temple. Without her there to protect them, staying in the castle not only ran the risk of their recipes being leaked, but also of those with authority forcibly stealing them away to serve someone else. Lady Rosemine had specifically asked that Ella and Rosina not be left there, since they were both especially valuable as young women. The personnel were informed that Lady Rosemine would remain asleep for over a year, then they were given their instructions. Ella, Hugo, please continue preparing food for the attendants in the orphanage as you have been. Lady Rosemine also wishes for Nicola to be given an opportunity to advance her dreams of becoming a chef, so please accept her service and guide her as an assistant. You are to assist with the completion of the recipe book, on which little progress has been made due to how busy things have been. And should you have any spare time, once that is done, she suggests that you start trying to invent new recipes of your own. Understood. Nicola wrote down in her diptych everything that needed to be done in the kitchen with a broad smile across her face. She would be handling all the writing as neither Ella nor Hugo could read, which was also likely a contributing factor toward the recipe book having progressed so little. Wait, Hugo can't read either? I figured he knew how to read. Because, in the anime we saw him looking over a recipe, so I figured that he knew how to read. Rosina, please teach the orphanage children to play music. Lady Rosemine has said that you may recognize some of them as having musical talent, even if they do not see it themselves. She believes that affording them an opportunity for their skills to blossom may change their future for the better. In other words, I need only teach them as Lady Christine taught me. Very well, I will do what I can. Upon hearing that Lady Rosemine wished to improve the value of the orphans to secure better workplaces for them, Rosina, who had been purchased to serve as a personal musician once herself, smiled softly and nodded. So began life in the temple without Lady Rosemine. Nicola assisted the chefs while working as an attendant, while Gil and Fritz continued their duties in the workshop and in the orphanage over the winter. Zom, Monica, and I generally spent our days working in the High Priest chambers, taking breaks only to eat and sleep. Preparations for the dedication ritual are complete. Does that mean the firewood is also ready? Brother Camphor, have you decided on an order for the priests? Brother Freetick, please send word to the other blue priests. We were able to finish preparing for the dedication ritual before the High Priest returned, just as we had the previous year. The work was completed without any considerable issues. Not only was that the second time Brother Camphor and Freetick were being entrusted with the preparations, there were also more blue priests willing to help. Huh, so not all of them are assholes. Okay. Well, they probably are to Rosemine because she was a commoner, but not anymore. Some of them, anyway. Is everything ready? The High Priest asked upon his return. He checked to make sure the preparations were properly completed, then praised the blue priests for their work. Well done. You may now rest until the dedication ritual in 2 days' time. He had the blue priest leave the room, then went into his hidden room to retrieve a bag of face stones. Once he had it, the two of us headed to the hidden room in which Lady Rosemine was still asleep. She looked just as she had on that fateful night, though the blue in the potion was darker than before, and the red lines on her skin seemed to be glowing. I left her alone for too long, the High Priest muttered, his brow furrowed and his frustration clear in his voice. He instructed me to put the face stones into the potion, and so I promptly obliged. These were black face stones and clear face stones. I took them out of the bag and dropped them into the potion one by one. They started to absorb Lady Rosemine's mana, causing the potion's color to fade before my very eyes. This fool compressed her mana far too much, the High Priest sighed, taking at Lady Rosemine's hand and glaring at the red lines on her skin. These face stones won't suffice at all. She is fortunate it is time for the dedication ritual. I then heard him murmur that the process would take longer than he had expected. While the High Priest recorded something about Lady Rosemine's health on a board, I removed the face stones that were now filled with her mana, delicately wiped them, then carefully put them back in the bag. That should do for today, the High Priest said. It became a daily job for me to take the face stones the priest had emptied during the dedication ritual and put them back into Lady Rosemine's potion to refill them. It was thanks to her mana that the dedication ritual concluded without issue. But even afterward, we needed to continue storing mana in preparation for spring prayer. Oh yeah, and that's what Charlotte ends up using. That I was wondering how they got her mana. I was wondering about that, and now I know. The High Priest and I entered the workshop once again. It certainly was a relief seeing Lady Rosemine each time, but the fact that she appeared completely unchanged was disheartening. Please wake up soon, Lady Rosemine. Everybody's worried about her. With the dedication ritual complete, the High Priest focused his efforts on the paperwork that had accumulated. Despite the increase in workload, both Lord Daniel and Lord Eckert were busy receiving special training with the Knight's Order, so the High Priest was once again supporting his lifestyle with potions, such that his attendants would murmur about how often they saw him reach for them. Oh no. Well, I mean, Rosemine's not there to help, and since Eckert and Daniel and the others are busy, they can't help either. It was easy to see that he was being buried under an avalanche of work, not just his own as the High Priest and from the castle, but also Lady Rosemine's High Bishop work and her duties with the orphanage, the workshop, and the planting company and the like. Despite having invested much time training blue priests to assist with his work, they were not capable of managing the orphanage, nor could they do business with the planting company, so that's all on the high priest right now. It's rare for members of the planting company to visit during the winter, and the orphanage likewise spends most of that time in hibernation, so I do not foresee any problems, I said. I mean, he's got Fran and the others to help with the orphanage and the workshop, so I mean, they can handle that pretty much on their own. But when it comes to the planting company, heck yeah, the high priest is going to have to handle that. Indeed, Rosemite already has her attendants handling the workshop. See, that's what I'm just saying. That's what I'm saying here. They can handle the orphanage and workshop, and I would like for them to handle some measure of the work. Once spring came, however, it was necessary to sell the winter handiwork and start making paper, which inevitably meant dealing with money and taking on duties that could not be put off. The high priest had work being loaded onto him from the castle as well, despite his numerous temple duties. So there was nothing he could do but give a bitter frown and pick up another potion. Sylvester, what the heck are you doing? Why are you giving this man more work when you know that he's got more thanks to Rosemite being asleep? Jesus, dude, what are you doing? There's nothing I would like less than to ask him for help. But I suppose I have no other choice. The high priest sent an ordinance, and after what was no more than a brief wait, we saw a high beast racing toward the temple at immense speed. In mere moments... Oh, he's asking justice for help. Okay. I guess he does... Oh, yeah, he definitely doesn't like asking him for help because of, how he is. Lord Justice, who had no reservations about visiting the lower city and understood Lady Rosamond's predicament, was kneeling before the high priest with sparkling eyes. Lord Ferdinand, I have arrived at your summons. You may count on me to manage the workshop and handle business with the merchants. Fritz, take Justice to the workshop and explain to him the finances of our business with the planting company. Justice, I am too busy to deal with you causing problems. Contain yourself. Is that understood? As you wish. Now then, Fritz, let us depart. Fritz, report to me the moment something happens. I shall not hesitate to beat Justice down in an instant if necessary. Lord Justice, not even trying to hide his excitement, practically dragged Fritz out of the room with him. I was terribly concerned about this, but calling for him truly been a good idea? High priest. Fear not, Fran. Justice has a love for gathering information, but he does not disclose his secrets lightly. Furthermore, he is my retainer. His eccentric nature belies his competence. As the high priest predicted, Lord Justice quickly grew accustomed to the workshop. He wasn't the kind of person to lord his status over others, and according to Fritz, he was exceptionally skilled when it came to fitting in with groups and working with others. Well, I mean, he has to be, considering he's an information gatherer. He's going to have to be able to fit in really easily with people. After many more visits to the workshop, Lord Justice asked me about the general workflow prior to Lady Rosemine's situation. I started preparing the relevant documents from the High Bishop's chambers, in the meantime deciding to ask him what he thought about his time there so far. Lord Justice, how has the workshop been? Very stimulating. Everything is so interesting there, as I would expect from something overseen by Lady Rosemine. She has trained quite fascinating subordinates. They even allowed me to switch the water when I first visited. It was neither proper nor acceptable for a noble to perform manual labor, so I could easily imagine how conflicted the workshop workers must have been when Lord Justice asked to do such a thing. Fritz must not have had an easy time. But the second I touched the paper on the boards, Lord Justice continued, one of the Laharos from the planting company yelled at me, "What are you doing, you idiot?" He shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. Lutz, why in the world would you do that? And Fritz, how could you allow that to happen? But as the blood drained from my face, Lord Justice continued with an endlessly amused expression. Silence had apparently fallen over the entire workshop after Lutz's outburst, with even Lutz himself realizing that he said something he shouldn't have. It's like right after you say it, you realize, oh shit. Before anyone else could speak up, however, Fritz had protectively stepped forward, wearing the kind of cold smile one would normally expect from Lord Ferdinand, immediately giving Lord Justice a strict lecture that he recalled verbatim. I did not expect the high priest to send us someone so incompetent that they would not understand the time and money lost from damaged paper. Even after having the entire process explained to them, he surely must have made an error in judgment due to being so busy. A manager who destroys products cannot take Lady Rosemine's place, and so I will. Report this to the high priest at once. We do not need someone who fails to understand the importance of our work. And what did you do then, Lord Justice? I obviously didn't want to be called useless and kicked out on my first day, especially knowing that Lord Ferdinand was desperate enough to have actually requested my help, so I gave them enough to cover the cost of the paper and a little extra to keep them quiet. Whew, sure was close. I need to use this opportunity to show off my talents and regain my honor. I've got to admit, I expected nothing less from Lady Rosemine's subordinates, considering how she herself always stands up to Lord Ferdinand, lecturing him about his reliance on potions being unhealthy and all that. Thank you. At least he acknowledges that that's unhealthy. That was probably not how most nobles would have reacted, but in any case, I kept my silence. He had evidently deemed it necessary to pay them off, and with the incident already over, I saw no reason to question his decision. There was equally no need to trouble the High Priest with such a matter, so I took Fritz's lead and spoke not a word about it. Lord Justice did not come to the temple particularly often, no doubt busy with his own matters, but he was just as skilled as the High Priest had said. Each time he arrived, he finished up multiple days of work all at once. While here, he would report to the High Priest on both the workshop and some other duty he had been given before returning to the Nobles' Quarter with yet more work pushed onto him. From the snippets of conversation I had managed to catch, it seemed that he was gathering information on the culprit who had harmed Lady Rosamine. Of course! Of course he'd have to do that! Why wouldn't they be looking into information on Gerlach and the others? Because we know that now Gerlach is responsible for this, but he knows that there's probably more than one person responsible for this whole thing. So they're probably looking into the other factions. The midpoint of spring approached, and so began preparations for spring prayer. It seemed that the Archduke's children will be taking Lady Rosamine's place this year, traveling the central district with faith stones in hand. Their plan was to divide the journey threefold to shorten the overall process, much like Lady Rosamine and the High Priest had done, except this time while borrowing two important people from the Archduke. It was truly heartrending that the High Priest was enduring such an overwhelming workload that he was forced to use any means available to him to get things done. As I knew more about the ceremonies than Lady Rosamine's other attendants, I accompanied Lady Charlotte as a guide. The High Priest gave me special instructions while we were preparing. Fran, use this opportunity to create a new saint. Tell a moving story to all those who can. Saint Rosamine was poisoned, protecting the Archduke's children, both of whom have declared their wish to offer blessings in the place of their sister to repay her noble deed. If they are showered with praise for being as compassionate and extraordinary as Lady Rosamine, then it'll become easier for us to use them next year as well. After the High Priest had explained how to lay the groundwork, he handed me a considerable number of the improved flavor rejuvenation potions. Yeah, right. They are not the improved flavor ones. Those are the nasty ones. I mean, frickin' Charlotte thought they were disgusting. He seemed to have noticed my hesitation to exploit the still young children of the Archduke, as he then gave me a dismissive scoff. If Charlotte and Wilfrid do not finish spring prayer, feeling confident in their own abilities, and subsequently refuse to also take Rosamine's place for the Harvest Festival, it is the orphanage that will suffer first due to the lack of food that would have been paid to Rosamine after the winter, he has noted. His message was clear. I had no choice but to accept the duty of establishing the legend of Saint Charlotte. The past few years had taught me all about the importance of money. This spring prayer needed to go well no matter what, or the temple and orphanage would suffer. As it was not traditional for underage apprentices to perform religious ceremonies, the only child-sized ceremonial clothes available to us belonged to Lady Rosamine. We gave Lady Charlotte her white high bishop robes, which required no alterations whatsoever, and Lord Wilfrid her blue ceremonial robes, which did need some alterations to accommodate his marginally greater height. These adjustments did not take long at all, though, thanks to Karina of the Gilberta Company having accounted for Lady Rosamine growing when she made the outfit. Yeah, because when she made the outfit, she figured that she'd be wearing it a lot. Or a heck of a lot more than she had, essentially. Because she didn't account for all the whole being the Archduke's daughter and all that. We requested the usual carriages from the planting company and prepared to go bring back Achim and Egan, who had been staying in the Haas's winter mansion. We also had knights accompanying us at the High Priest's request. Twice as many as usual to guard against a potential attack by members of the nobility. Oh, especially considering all this going on right now, too. Definitely. Lady Charlotte did not have a high beast, as she had yet to enter the Royal Academy, so I traveled in a carriage for the first time in quite a while. She seemed to have great respect for Lady Rosamine, as she rejoiced when I told her about her sister's expectations in the experiences in the temple. In return, I was graced with stories of Lady Rosamine's time in the castle, so it was a very productive journey overall. When Richt first spotted Lady Charlotte upon our arrival in Haas, he mistakenly thought they hadn't been forgiven after all. Following my explanation that Saint Charlotte was dedicating herself to bless the land in her sister's absence, however, he welcomed her with tears of gratitude. Lady Charlotte was notably tense about performing her first ceremony, but she took the face stone with Lady Rosemine's mana and completed it brilliantly. We reunited with Occam and Egan before moving to the monastery, where I first checked to see that everything was in order. Then had Lady Charlotte award the soldiers with their payment. "Fran, may I ask how the High Bishop is?" Gunter asked upon receiving his money, his expression clouded over. It seems the burden on her body was even greater than the High Priest expected, and her sleep will most likely continue for longer still. I see. Of course he's going to be worried about her. While we were on the road, Lady Charlotte used far fewer potions than Lady Rosemine, and when spring prayer came to an end, she had used only a small portion of all those we had brought. I couldn't help but sigh at how unhealthy and weak Lady Rosemine truly was. She had needed to use the bulk of our potions just to survive to the end. Wow! Rosemine, good God, girl, you've got to get that thing, your body healed. Jesus Christ! Upon returning from spring prayer, Gil came to me for advice, wanting to know how we would proceed with the printing. My understanding was that Lady Rosemine had gathered stories from the noble children while at the castle, and after discussing matters with the High Priest, he delivered to me the stories collected in the winter playroom. I promptly gave them to Gil, but he merely scratched his ear uncomfortably and shook his head. "I can't print these. They are written the way kids talk, so they need to be fixed up to read more like a book. Do you know anyone who can do that?" I can say with all certainty that nobody has the time to do such a thing at the moment. With that said, Lady Rosemine had managed to write her manuscripts alongside assisting the High Priest, memorizing the procedures for many ceremonies, and heading to the castle to play her role as a noble daughter. Despite all the time we had spent together, I still found myself stunned by her love for books and her obsession with making them. Several days later, Gil came to say that Thule wanted us to teach her proper etiquette. She would pay us with a book of collected short stories that Lady Rosemine had made for her and her family. The text was already edited to be readable, and Gil wanted to have it printed next after the collection of night stories. Thule was Lady Rosemine's true sister, and she had provided much help to those in the orphanage. The High Priest therefore granted her his permission, determining that this would be a good opportunity to repay her for all she had done. There was no better people for the task than Rosina and Wilma, since they had been strictly trained in the way of proper etiquette beneath Sister Christine, and so I asked for their assistance. It seemed that Lutz would be learning alongside Thule as well. I came by to see how the lessons were going for a short while. The sight of their struggles made me a little nostalgic for when Lady Rosemine had continuously gotten her long sleeves caught in everything she possibly could. While I was there, Wilma mentioned that Thule was offering advice on how to raise Dirk. The orphanage had lost all the Grey Shrine maidens who had given birth themselves, so nobody was quite sure how to raise a toddler. Lady Rosemine had provided some guidance, but Wilma and Delia wished to know all they could, and so they were endlessly grateful for Thule's wisdom. She had learned much from helping raise her younger brother, who was a similar age to Dirk. Nicola came of age at the end of spring. Oh! We held a small celebration just as we had for Rosina, but she largely just wailed about how Lady Rosemine wasn't there to teach her new recipes as she had expected. This outburst was somewhat short-lived, though, as a smile returned to her face the instant Ella brought some sweets and mentioned that Lady Rosemine could simply teach her the recipes when she eventually woke. The Italian restaurant came asking for new recipes around the same time as Nicola's coming-of-age ceremony, but we simply said they would need to come up with some themselves, as it was due to be another year before Lady Rosemine woke up. This somehow turned into Hugo and Lace sharing information about their original creations, which in turn fired up the kitchen staff. They spoke as though their pride as chefs was on the line, determined to produce food that was worthy of Lady Rosemine's name. Halfway through summer, sometime after the Starbine ceremony, Lady Rosemine's guard knight, Lady Bridget, was relieved of duty and returned to her home province of Ilgner. It seemed that she was preparing to get— Wait! Who? To who? What? Rosemine, you're gonna be pissed! She's gonna be pissed she missed all this! Jesus! We don't even get to meet the guy until she wakes up! And even then! Lord Daniel seemed to be exceedingly depressed, so I can imagine things had not gone well between them. I could not say I was surprised, though. The High Priest had mentioned that a relationship would be trying for them, given their different classes and circumstances. I mean, it's the only problem with that, though, was the whole Ilgner situation. And the fact that she was so attached to her hometown that if they had decided, they would live in the Nobles' Quarter and everything, and then visit Ilner from time to time, then that would have been a different story. And they could have been together. But I think that was the main problem here. Was she was just too attached to her home and not taking care of not focusing her attention on Lady Rosemine like she was supposed to. I did not understand marriage much myself, but I could at the very least pray to the gods that he would see more success in his duties as a knight than he had trying to procure a wife. Hugo and Ella walked up to me, passing by Lord Daniel as he continued to mope. "What is the important announcement you spoke of?" I asked. The two exchanged a look. Wait! Holy shit! Rosemary's gonna be happy about this one! I was not expecting this, to be completely honest with you guys. Hugo and Ella getting married! Rosemary's gonna be angry that she missed all this! Bright grins creeping under their faces. "We're getting married," Hugo announced. "Both our parents approved." I can see Daniel No, don't say that in front of him. Don't say that in front of him right now. He's not happy right now. I could see Daniel covering his ears out of the corner of my eye. This evidently wasn't something that he wanted to hear about right now. Yeah, he doesn't. Oh, you can see him in the corner. Oh, poor guy. Poor Daniel. I feel so bad for the guy. He needs a wife. He needs someone to love too. Jeez. "So we thought we'd come to you to discuss what happens next," Hugo continued. "I understand, but this news has come too suddenly for me to tell you something for sure. Please give me time to discuss the matters with the High Priest. What is one meant to do in this situation? I couldn't have been more unprepared to discuss this with them. Under normal circumstances, the word marriage was never even spoken within the temple's walls. I went straight to the High Priest, only for him to grimace with exceeding annoyance and dismissively wave his hand. Those two are Rosemine's personnel. It is not my place to give them permission or instructions in her absence, and so I cannot allow them to marry before she awakens. Simply instruct them to prepare a successor for Ella in the case that she does marry and subsequently needs to resign." Yeah, just in case. I mean, I'm sure Nicola would love to take the opportunity. I'm sure they've been training her this whole time. But, I imagine that if they can, I imagine they would still want to work for her. The only problem I could see coming up would be, because I'm assuming they have their own places they live, and they'll have their own home once they get married, is Ella getting pregnant and having her own kid. That's going to be, she might have to resign, yeah. I have to agree on that one. I passed the High Priest's message on to them, which ultimately made Ella blow up with anger. "I'm not going to quit being a cook even when I do get married," she barked. "What, is that true?" I asked. "Will bearing a child not leave you unable to work?" "I need a little time off, obviously, but how will we survive if I quit my job right after getting married?" "Is that customary in the lower city?" The High Priest mentioned that women cease working once they are wed, but we as priests are forbidden from getting married. This subject is quite honestly not one that I understand. No, I mean, I'm assuming that Luz's mom still works. I'm assuming that Effa still works. So, I mean, probably for nobles, it probably is the case, but not for commoners. The married life Ella spoke of was significantly different from what the High Priest had said. It seemed that he was just as unfamiliar with the circumstances of commoners as I was. Yeah, definitely. Nobles are a lot different from us commoners. I plan on working even after getting married, but if that's new to you guys, I guess I'll need to wait until Lady Rosemine wakes up for sure. "Oh well," Ella said, seeming to give up relatively quickly. Hugo, on the other hand, was not so understanding. "Hold it, Ella, don't give up that easily." "Huh? I'm not giving up. There's no getting around the fact that we gotta wait, though, is there?" "But waiting means not having the stars of next year's not being the stars of next year's Star Festival, right? Right? Who can say? It all depends on Lady Rosemine," I said, earning me a sharp glare from Hugo. "God, am I fated to never get married? I can get girlfriends, but not wives. Is that how it is, Fran?" he exclaimed, grabbing me by the shoulders and shaking me about. There was no answer I could give him, though. This matter truly was beyond me. "Yeah, you're asking the wrong guy, Hugo." "You can get married? Good God, dude! just wait until Lady Rosemine wakes up. Jesus, I'm sure she'd love to do the Starbite ceremony for you guys. Summer ended and the development of the new ink was complete, which meant the Rosemine workshop could now start printing higher quality playing cards. The new paper they were being printed on was firm and glossy, producing cards entirely unlike those made of wood, while the various colors of ink meant that each suit could now be easily differentiated and decorated with beautiful visuals. One autumn day, close to the Harvest Festival, Brother Egmont suddenly visited the High Bishop's chambers with a single gray shrine maiden in tow. Oh no. She looked sick with anxiety, and the sight caused me to defensively tense up a little. Brother Egmont, I do not recall you arranging a meeting. Why would I need to when the High Bishop's gone and there's only Grey Priest here, he retorted. You'd go to the High Priest, dude! I glanced at Zom, who had smoothly disappeared into the kitchen. He was likely leaving through a back door to inform the High Priest of this sudden arrival, so I needed to buy time until they returned. My sincerest apologies. We have not welcomed a Blue Priest without an appointment before, and as we are somewhat unprepared, I can imagine some urgent business has inspired your arrival. May I ask what it is? Take Lily back to the orphanage and get me a new attendant. Bring me Grey Shrine Maidens. Hell no! I swiftly looked over at Monica, who spun around and exited the room at once to inform Wilma before turning back to Brother Egmont. My sincerest apologies once again, but we cannot accommodate such a request without advance warning. Why not? The Grey Shrine Maidens all have duties given to them by Lady Rosemine. It will take time to gather them together and give them the manual labor they have been engaged in. Given the manual labor they have been engaged in, they will not be clean enough to be presented so suddenly to a Blue Priest. Brother Egmont crossed his arms, not really seeming to understand. He evidently wasn't familiar with the concept of a Grey Shrine Maiden not being immediately presentable. If you are to be taking a new attendant, it is necessary that it look as beautiful as possible rather than being brought in the midst of their work, I continued. I believe it is in your best interest to return to your chambers for today and wait for the candidates to be prepared. Despite his frustration, Brother Egmont ultimately agreed. He was a Blue Priest, repulsed by even the thought of something unsightly. If that's settled, may I ask why you are returning Lily to the orphanage, I asked? It is important for us to know how she has displeased you. My question was purely for appearance's sake, though. There was only one reason Grey Shrine Maidens were ever returned to the orphanage, and so I simply kept my eyes down and pretended to write things on a form. She got pregnant. Oh, great! This is a new development! Brother Egmont said tersely, looking down at Lily with a disgusted grimace. She's been whining about feeling sick for days, and now she's throwing up everywhere. I've never seen an attendant this useless in my life. I see. It certainly is unacceptable for an attendant to be unable to do their duties. Seeing that we were in agreement, Brother Egmont lightened up a little, his tone now slightly less harsh. Exactly. I needed a replacement immediately. That said, it is the High Priest who handles the ownership of attendants, not the High Bishop. I must ask that you schedule a meeting with him. Excuse me? You're the High Bishop's attendant. Handle it yourself. Brother Egmont had been favored by the previous High Bishop, and so he was used to speaking solely to him whenever he wanted something done. Things were different now, though. The High Priest was working hard to return the temple to how it had been before the previous High Bishop's reign. The transfer of priests and shrine maidens comes under the High Priest jurisdiction, I explained. I am aware that such distinctions were at times ignored in the past, but that is no longer the case. You're pretty cocky for a Grey Priest. Brother Egmont raised a hand to strike me, but before he could, there came a small chime. I internally sighed with relief. That was the High Priest's bell, meaning Zom must have returned with him. My apologies, Brother Egmont, but I have already arranged a meeting with the High Priest here. However, I will give my meeting time so that you may settle this matter with him first. He had no problem arriving unannounced with only Grey Priests were present, but he wouldn't be so rude to the High Priest himself. Members of the former High Bishop's faction remained uncooperative with the High Priest, and for that reason their income was slowly being slashed, forcing them into more uncomfortable lifestyles. Ha ha! Fran, why is Egmont here? The High Priest asked upon entering the room, meeting him with a displeased stare. I believe I am already scheduled for a meeting at this time. Brother Egmont arrived without warning. It seems he wishes to replace one of his Grey Shrine Maidens post-haste, I responded promptly. I see. The transfer of priests and shrine maidens comes under my jurisdiction, Egmont, so you are to arrange a meeting with me, not the High Bishop's attendants. Return to your chambers for today, and my time is already occupied. Brother Egmont dragged Lily out of the room, ultimately having no choice but to arrange a meeting at a later date. Zom shut the door firmly behind him, at which point I knelt before the High Priest. I truly apologize for the disturbance. There is no need. I predicted that incidents of this manner would occur with Rosemine gone, but replacing a Grey Shrine Maiden, I imagine she will be quite upset if she discovers I did not handle this as she would. What a pain. The High Priest went on to explain Lady Rosemine's will. She had been quite firm that while she did not mind Grey Shrine Maidens who wanted to be attendants being given to Blue Priests, she would under no circumstances accept someone being forced into it, even if that necessitated her taking them on as her own attendants. Lady Rosemine truly is soft when it comes to the orphanage. It was of course heartwarming since it was so much like her, but it also made me worry for the future when Lady Rosemine was no longer the High Bishop. Fran, I imagine that Egmont will send his request to the meeting without hesitation. I intend to meet with him at Fifth Bell 3 days from now. Be prepared to bring Shrine Maidens from the orphanage with Rosemine's will in mind. As you wish. After seeing the High Priest off, I left the chambers to Zom and went directly to the orphanage. There was no escaping that someone would be chosen to become Brother Egmont's new attendant, so preparations would need to be made before it was time for the meeting. Oh god, I feel so bad for anybody who has to become that jerk's attendant. Because most likely, they'll end up in the same situation that Lily is in. I feel so bad for her too. Because I imagine it was either Brother Egmont's kid or someone else that he forced onto her. Bastard. When I arrived, I was welcomed by a trembling Wilma, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Fran, what happened? She asked me. Monica was at her side looking worried for her. Lily has become pregnant. A new attendant is going to be selected for Brother Egmont 3 days from now. 3 days from now? The High Priestess said we are going to respect Lady Rosemine's will, so it should not be as tragic as you may think. Wilma's fear of men meant that she did not want to leave the orphanage, so her position as one of Rosemine's attendants was more than she could have ever hoped for. The other Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens stuck in the orphanage, however, saw leaving to serve a Blue Priest as moving up in the world. To many, even becoming an attendant for Brother Egmont was considered worthwhile. Oh, I feel so bad for them! There were more adult Grey Shrine Maidens in the orphanage than before, with many having come of age, just like Rosina and Nicola had, but there was still only 20 or so in total. They were all lined up, some tightly clasping their hands as they hoped to stay at the orphanage, others debating with themselves whether or not this was something they wanted, and still others looking ahead with sparkling eyes, eagerly looking forward to being chosen just as Delia had in the past. Oh, I hate that they're thinking this way. Brother Egmont is a bad person! Do any of you wish to become Brother Egmont's attendant, I asked. 4 women shot their hands up in an instant. I gazed across them, completely ignoring those who still seemed to be unsure about the decision, then nodded. Very well, you 4 shall accompany me to the meeting 3 days from now. Fran, won't you be bringing them all? Wilma asked, blinking several times in surprise. She was used to all the Shrine Maidens of adult age being taken out of the orphanage, with the Blue Priests then choosing whoever they liked most. It is Lady Rosemine's will that each orphan have the power to choose their future. Those who wish to become attendants will therefore be prioritized. 3 days later, at Fifth Bell, I brought the 4 Shrine Maidens who had volunteered to the High Priest's chambers. Brother Egmont looked at them and frowned. Just 4? Many Shrine Maidens were executed by the former High Bishop. Were you not aware, Brother Egmont? No, I was. Anyway, these girls aren't bad. The former High Bishop had prioritized appearances above all else when choosing which Shrine Maidens to keep alive, so it was only natural that those who remained had praiseworthy beauty. Brother Egmont compared them with a vulgar look in his eyes, then pointed at one. All right, you. The selected Shrine Maiden was left behind as I returned to the orphanage with Lily and the other 3. The High Priest would handle the contract himself. I didn't know the specifics, but I was aware that those being assigned to serve Blue Priests were made to sign a magic contract preventing them from leaking details of Lady Rosemine's recipes, workshop, or personal life. Good! Wilma was already waiting for us when we returned to the orphanage. Welcome back, Lily. It must have been quite the struggle to work while so unwell. Here you may rest as much as you need to. Lily suddenly burst into tears. Wilma stroked her back, listening compassionately as the girl sobbed about being deathly afraid of her body changing in ways she did not understand, and the Blue Priest she had served calling her useless and in the way. It had hurt her heart beyond words. Deciding to leave Lily to Wilma, I exited the orphanage. This was surely the best possible result, just as Lady Rosemine wished. A Shrine Maiden who desired to become an attendant had done so, while one who did not was allowed to quit. In any case, there was now a pregnant woman in the orphanage, and that introduced its own problems. Lily had said she did not understand the changes her body was going through, but neither did we. I asked the High Priest what he knew, but he merely said to ignore her. That's not nice. Explaining that the baby would simply be born on its own after enough time. We all trusted his judgments, and as the whole orphanage seemed particularly relaxed about it all, Tully and Les visited to learn etiquette as planned. I mean, they could give her some advice. I mean, Tully's mom was pregnant. Ignore her? Born on its own? That's ridiculous, Thule exclaimed. Childbirth is a crazy big deal. Do no babies just pop out of thin air or something? It's not something you can do without preparations. You've got to deliver the baby with a ton of people helping, Lutz added. The blood drained from my face. Thule had assisted when her mother gave birth, and as a boy, Lutz always raced to help when a neighbor was in such a situation. So their words held considerable weight. It was only then that I remembered commoners and nobles had distinct cultures and understood things differently. It was likely that they had their own understandings of childbirth as well, and given that the orphanage didn't have mana or magic tools, the commoner perspective was a lot more relevant to us. With the high priest's advice on the matter now no longer of use to us, we had no choice but to rely on outside help. But there was nobody in the orphanage with childbirth experience, and nobody in the lower city was eccentric enough to come somewhere we widely scorned to help. Eva would! If only Lady Rosemine were here. Her absence was painful. She had likewise seen her little brother's birth up close. No, she had not, actually! And would have been simple enough for her to gather commoners in the lower city to assist. My mom would come for sure, but I don't think she can do it all on her own, Thule said. I'll see what Master Benno can do, Lutz continued. Karina's given birth before, so I'm sure he knows what we'll need. And so Lutz went to consult Master Benno, who had apparently responded with, Babies don't just come out on their own. It's too dangerous to have people that are ignorant handle this. That woman's gonna die there. Everyone went pale upon hearing that, never having considered this would be so difficult. Yeah, childbirth in the medieval age was awful! There was so many freaking deaths after childbirth that it was insane! So yeah, it's a good thing that they're getting advice on this. When Lutz and Thule asked Master Benno to think of a solution, his conclusion was to bring Lily to Haas during the Harvest Festival. The monastery there had a better relationship with commoners than the temple, and if Occam and Egan asked for help after spending the winter there on the High Bishop's orders, it was likely that at least a few women would volunteer. Furthermore, Master Benno had said that even the orphans from Haas would know more about childbirth than the shrine maidens in the temple. As expected of Master Benno, thank you for providing advice even during these busy times. Following Master Benno's recommendations, we made the necessary preparations to move Lily to Haas. We also asked the planting company what tools we would need for the childbirth itself and made sure they were at hand. It wasn't long before I was boarding one of the carriages heading to Haas for the Harvest Festival with Lily, Occam, and Egan. I had written a letter addressed to Richt in advance, requesting his assistance with the childbirth. Lady Charlotte delivered the letter for me, then confirmed that he had agreed to help. As expected, Nora had previous experience assisting with childbirth with such matters, as she played an important role expecting everything we had brought, checked on Lily's health, and figuring out when she was likely to give birth. I'd estimate somewhere around the end of spring, she said. When it's time for spring prayer, please bring a few extra shrine maidens. We don't need many men, since they can't come into the room while she's giving birth. I see. Men not being allowed explains why Thule and Lutz have different things, or know different things. Lily remained in Haas as we departed for our next stop during the Harvest Festival. We were receiving Lord Wilfrid and Lady Charlotte's assistance here as well, as planned, so we easily gathered what we needed for winter preparation. We cooperated with the Gilberta Company to help butcher the pigs just like we had the year before, and everything was progressing smoothly, that is, until the end of autumn approached. Master Benno from the Planting Company was summoned by the High Priest and told he was to expand the printing industry. It seemed that Lady Rosemine's mother, Lady Elvira, wished to establish a printing workshop in her family's whole province. Uh-oh. Yeah, with this, we were told about this in the last video. With, Lutz's, story. No rest for us. It will simply be impossible to begin right now. Even if we do leave immediately, not a single piece of paper can be made in the province with frozen rivers. Plus, how will you support us with food and materials when Haldensel freezes over, trapping us there? Benno asked, protesting the immediacy of the demand. I imagine Geeb Haldensel would provide you with food, but it certainly would be pointless to send you there before any work can be done. The High Priest replied, falling into thought. I could tell from the troubled look on Master Benno's face that he was wishing Lady Rosemine was present to support him. Every workshop would require its own preparations, and I will not be able to establish them all myself without first securing the assistance of the Merchants Guild, Master Benno explained. Using noble authority to force matters will only breed discontent and cause problems in the future. Nobles, merchants, and craftspeople each have their own distinct customs. You and Lady Elvira surely both understand how necessary it is to lay the proper groundwork, correct? In that case, prepare a list of everything you will require and have it delivered to me by the winter baptism ceremony. It is necessary to provide concrete evidence of what needs to be arranged before work can begin. Master Benno left the high priest's room, cradling his head as he trudged to the front gate. He later returned for a business negotiation with Lady Elvira, with the high priest present as the one responsible for the printing industry in Lady Rosemine's absence. Lady Elvira had something that she wanted printed for winter socializing, no matter the cost, and it was to that end that she required her own workshop, which she wanted to be constructed immediately. In that case, we will print what you need ourselves at the Rosemine workshop, Master Benno suggested. It would mean them abandoning winter preparation to desperately run the workshop at full capacity for a while, but his proposal was accepted, buying him some time before they needed to build a printing workshop in Haldensel. Master Benno went straight to the workshop to directly ask the Grey Priest for their help. Not a single person refused. They owed much to the planting company, and so they wanted to do whatever they could to repay them. He promptly took out the manuscript that Lady Elvira had given him, with both Gil and Lutz frowning upon seeing how thick it was. "It'll take too long to set the letters with this many pages. We don't even know how many characters this is," Lutz said. "Yeah, we should go with mimeograph printing for this one," Gil agreed. They both nodded, then headed to the orphanage with some paper and their tools in hand. Everyone else had already started work making the necessary preparations, having sprung into action the moment they heard the words mimeograph printing. Master Benno blinked, impressed at how well organized their workflow was, at which point Prince walked over to him. "Master Benno, we intend to do everything in our power to help, but what about winter preparations? There's so much we're going to lack if we miss the opportunity to gather in the forest." I went ahead and charged them in a huge express fee. If we're going to make this happen, we'll need to buy most of our winter prep. "In that case, I have a list of things we will need. Can I ask you to take care of them?" "Yep, I'm the one forcing all this work on you after all. That's the least I can do. If Master Benno handling winter preparation for us, we'll be able to keep working until right before winter socializing begins." "Thank you. In which case, you may return to your store now, Master Benno. I imagine we are not the only ones you need to discuss this with." "Nope. Thanks, Fritz. See you later." With that, Benno spun around and exited the workshop. "Fran, it is as you heard. I will entrust the orphanage winter preparations to you," Fritz said, pushing the workshop's list of necessary goods into my hands. I went ahead to the orphanage since I needed to collect a list from them as well. When I arrived, Les and Gil were already lining up tools on the dining room hall table. "Rosina, may I ask you to make stencils for the letters, then have Wilma make stencils for the art?" Lutz asked. "If there's anyone else who can write nicely, please have them make stencils as well," Gil added. It shouldn't be too much of a problem for the pages to have different kinds of handwriting." "I came here to teach music, but I suppose I can help," Rosina said with a single sigh, as she accepted the manuscript. "Oh? This handwriting is already quite elegant. We can make stencils directly out of these sheets." "Perfect. Let's make people making stencils then. We'll just trace the handwritten page we've already got." As Lutz and Gil raced around, explaining the circumstances to everyone, I went over to Wilma and acquired the orphanage's winter preparation list. It was similar to the one Lady Rosemine had prepared during her first year here, with everything organized so that one could tell at a glance what it was and wasn't yet done. "At Fritz's request, I shall be handling the orphanage's winter preparation," I explained. "Please do your best to help the workshop, Wilma." "I thank you ever so much, Fran." With Zom and Monica's help, I organized what we needed the planting company to acquire for us. The list was fairly sizable since our preparations involved the High Bishop's chambers, the orphanage, and the workshop. As for the food we had received during the Harvest Festival, I was trusting Hugo, Ella, and Nicola to prepare it all. We were all busily running around with far too much work for us to reasonably complete. We all threw ourselves into our duties, leaving no time to even assist the High Priest with his work, and as a result we were just barely able to finish Lady Elvira's order before winter socializing began. The workshop was filled with glee, and as the workers burst into cheers, I started flipping through one of the books. Don't show it to Birdman! Don't show it to him! Do not! I repeat, do not show it to him! He's gonna have a cow! Actually, he wouldn't be able to do Actually, he could still do a Gothstern thing about it. He's the freaking brother of the Archduke. Elvira is just an arch noble. He could still do something about it, but I don't know if he will. It seems to me that the illustrations in this book strongly resemble the High Priest. Has he given his permission for this to be printed, I asked, recalling Lady Rosemine complaining about him getting mad and forbidding her from printing any such pictures in his likeness. Master Benno looked slightly sicker and more exhausted than usual, shot me a glare. He ordered us to print this himself. And we got the manuscript from Lady Elvira. Who are we to ask questions? Who's going to pay for all our losses if someone doesn't keep their mouth shut and sticks their nose where it doesn't belong, huh? The gleam in his dark eyes silenced me at once. I hadn't the will to argue with Master Benno when he was irritated and sleep-deprived, and it was indeed true that the High Priest had asked us to satisfy Lady Elvira's request by printing whatever it was she desired. What in the world is going to happen at this year's winter socializing? I want to know! I want to be a fly on the wall for this one. It would soon be a year since the incident with Lady Rosemine, but the High Priest had said she was still far from waking up. I did not understand the details, but it seemed her mana was so extremely compressed that it was taking an excessively long time to dissolve. Well, that's partially due to the freaking poison that caused that, too. Because if it was just her compressing it, they would have been able to make her completely healthy. But no, because of that, she now has 5 freaking units of compressed mana still after she wakes up. Which is still less than what she had when she went to bed, when she was, before all this, but still. The High Priest instructed me to replace the face stones in the Jareve while he examined Lady Rosemine, grumbling complaints all the while. How did you ever survive with this much mana inside of you, Rosemine? How? He muttered. Well, that's partially, like I said, it's partially the poison that did that, because she did say that her mana was kind of stuck when she tried to get in the room before they put her in the Jareve, so I mean, whatever. As I stacked a new board atop the growing pile beside Lady Rosemine, I thought to myself that she most likely lived due to the will of the gods. Winter socializing began, and with the High Priest absent, we once again had to prepare for the dedication ritual without him. We were all used to this by now, and as things progressed smoothly, even without an authority present to direct us. Unlike last year, the High Priest did return once during our preparations, but he went back to the castle soon after checking on Lady Rosemine. It seemed that face stones filled with her mana would once again be used for the dedication ritual. At Tuli's recommendation, we elected to compile a book explaining noble etiquette and euphemisms during the winter. Master Benno had concluded that while it would not sell to nobles, it would be popular among rich merchants and the authorities of towns and cities. Oh, heck yeah, it would! Spring arrived without any significant change in Lady Rosemine's condition. The planting company was busy hurrying about, not knowing when Lady Elvira's next request would come, and in the midst of all this, Master Benno graciously attended a meeting about spring prayer at our behest. The meeting was held within the orphanage director's chambers, with Wilma and 3 great shrine maidens who would be joining Lily and Haas in attendance. As the planting company primarily employed men, Tuli was there as well, due in part to Master Benno having determined that her experience with the orphanage would make discussing matters with the shrine maidens easier. I expect that by spring prayer, Lutz and I will be in Haldensel, he began. I'll leave Mark behind this time to make communication easier, so just send word to him once it's time. The Gilberta company will be fine as well with Tuli there. Tuli nodded in agreement with a smile. Her etiquette studies had truly paid off, such that she looked naturally graceful even while seated. It is safe to assume these 4 shrine maidens will be leaving to help with the birth, Master Benno asked. Not quite. I'm going to be staying behind, Wilma said quietly, shaking her head with an openly nervous expression. Master Benno raised an eyebrow. Aren't you the attendant Lady Rosemine left in charge of the orphanage? That's how you were introduced to me. I'm pretty sure you should leave the orphanage to someone else and go help with the birth. There's a lot of stuff you'll need to learn how to do. That is certainly true, but Wilma trailed off, shaking her head over and over again as if fanning the air with her face. She then looked to me for help. I could imagine she was definitely afraid of even speaking to Master Benno, so I swiftly explained her circumstances to him. A blue priest tried to force himself on her, and she's been too afraid of men to leave the orphanage ever since. Huh? Master Benno repeated. His previously calm face suddenly flashed with anger, and his voice dropped into a growl. Don't make me laugh. What? You're in charge of the orphanage, right? Cut the crap. Who knows how many births you're going to have to deal with from now on? How's this place going to survive when the person in charge doesn't know jack about childbirth? Don't think Haas is going to help out every time. They're doing this at once as an act of kindness, as you can handle it yourselves from here on out, and don't you friggin' forget it. Master Benno fixed Woman with such a wrathful, frightening stare that tears began to stream down her face. She desperately shook her head, not knowing what else to do. But you came to me because you had no one to call on without Lady Rosemine, and despite how friggin' busy I am, I agreed to help you get out of this mess. And what do I get in return? The very person who asked for my assistance, saying she doesn't want to do anything but stay locked up in the orphanage. That was not my... Wilma looked completely taken aback, lightly having never expected to be chastised so harshly. Master Benno faced her head on and continued, not once breaking eye contact. Then what was your intention, huh? Stay locked up inside and pray that everything magically solves itself? This is your job. I don't have time to help someone who's not even willing to go out and learn for themselves. If you don't go to Haas, I'm not lending you any carriages. It's just half a day away, right? You can walk. Master Benno! Lady Rosamund had paid for carriages and guards such that the sheltered Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens weren't exposed to danger. But here Master Benno was suggesting that they walk a road that would take an average commoner half a day to tread. I don't have time for cowards with no motivation, but Master Benno said bluntly, standing up from his seat. I've got work to do. The planting company has to prepare for depart for Hollinsdale, so I'm leaving. Please wait, I'll go. So please grant us your help, Wilma pleaded between sobs. Girl, you've got to get over this sooner or later. And I think this is why he's doing this. He's trying to help you. You've got to stand up for yourself more. Master Benno sat down again, his brow knitted in a deep frown. We discussed what needed to be prepared for spring prayer, then concluded the meeting. The very moment Master Benno left the room, Wilma collapsed onto the table, continuing to cry. I looked down at her with a sympathetic yet distant eyes. I understand the fear of being forced to do something you do not wish to do. But you were rescued before even being thrust into such a situation yourself. There are some people who never got saved, and are forced to do things against their wishes repeatedly. Yeah, like Lily and the other attendants who are having to do that sort of stuff. And, Fran, speaking from experience on this one. Oh, boy. It is necessary that you learn to live on even in those situations and gradually conquer your weaknesses. Fran, does Lily wish for the child she is about to give birth to? I imagine not, but even so she's fighting against her fear and doing her best to see it through. Wilma raised her head, a look of realization slowly dawning on her face. I continued, now speaking more quietly. For how many years has Lady Rosamund protected you? It was because of your encouragement that Rosina worked so hard to overcome her inability to do paperwork. Lady Rosamund likewise worked hard in learning to live as a noble. You advised them both, and now I believe it is time for you to conquer your own weaknesses as well. The Gutenbergs waited for Geeb Haldensel to return to his home province before beginning their move. They departed for Haldensel along with Gil and several Grey Priests. Not long after, it came time to leave for spring prayer. Tula came to see us off since she was so worried for Wilma and started encouraging her as best she could. Wilma, I am certain there is nothing to fear, she said, sounding far more like a well-raised noble than she had prior to her etiquette training. Our father is among the soldiers serving as your guards. Our father? Ah! Wilma suddenly recalled that Tuli and Lady Rosamund were sisters, then looked over at Gunter, who was watching his daughter with a worried expression. There are none there who would mock or assault one of Lady Rosamund's precious attendants, Tuli assured her. You may rest easy, I promise. I thank you ever so much. Driven by Tuli's encouragement and Gunter's silent approval, Wilma stepped forward on trembling legs and climbed into a carriage. Spring came to an end, and we received word from Wilma that Lily had safely given birth, thank God. On an early summer day with pleasant weather, I requested carriages from Master Mark and departed for the monastery in Haas. I then returned with Wilma, the great shrine maidens who had gone to help, and Lily with her newborn baby. Wilma's expression was much brighter now that she had experienced life outside the orphanage, and there was a strength in her eyes that made her seem much stronger and more reliable than she was before. Yay! Good for Wilma! Good for Wilma. Thanks, Beggo. You kind of helped her with that. You were harsh, but she needed it to be. Everyone in the orphanage began taking turns looking after the baby, just as they had done with Dirk. It wasn't long before Wilma and Lily were wearing exhausted expressions at almost all times. Of course, that's going to happen, dude. It's a newborn baby. They're going to cry and need everything all the time. So sleep when they are sleeping. Summer 2 ended before we knew it. Lady Rosamund had not yet woken enough, even by the time Monica came of age. But on one autumn day near the harvest festival, the high priest gave a small smile after checking up on her. She has begun to move her fingertips. Her recovery is around 70, perhaps 80% complete. All we must do is wait for her to awaken. I am glad. After spending such a long time asleep, it was a relief to see her, though she was finally showing signs of awakening. We still could not expect anything in the immediate future, but after enduring so many seasons without even the slightest change, even the smallest good sign was enough to fill me with joy. One autumn day to the harvest festival. Okay. I think this is around the time that she wakes up. Good grief. Just how much trouble do you have to give me before you're satisfied, he asked the still sleeping Lady Rosamund. Despite his tone sounding so annoyed as usual, there was both immense relief and intense worry in his eyes. During the harvest festival, the high priest returned to the temple every 2 to 3 nights by high beast to check on Lady Rosamund. She must be immensely important to the high priest, Psalms noted with a somewhat bemused smile after seeing him off yet again. She is. Out of everyone he has ever met, Lady Rosemine is the only one who has actively tried to reduce his workload. She's sincerely worried about his health, scolding him for relying on potions so much, and challenged the Archduke himself on his behalf. There is surely no other High Bishop in the world who would show him that much consideration. My words prompted Zom to rub his forehead and sigh, no doubt recalling the High Priest's current workload and unhealthy lifestyle. I pray for his sake that she awakens soon, he said, looking toward the hidden room where she was asleep. Though I imagine that even then, his days of constant headaches will only begin anew. But at least his workload would go down. It was a number of days after the Harvest Festival ended that the High Priest informed me Lady Rosemine had awoken and would need to be given a bath. Really? Still? Jesus Christ, how long have I been recording for? Jesus, an hour! That took an hour! Jesus Lord! The Lay Noble Guard Knight. You are my brother, and this incident involves our entire family. You understand this, yes? Then tell me, Daniel, why did you propose to Lady Bridget, then shamelessly refuse her when she agreed to marry you? Because I don't want to move to Ilgner and leave Lady Rosemine's service. Duh! Soon after I had turned down Bridget on the night of star bonding, my brother, the head of our house, dragged me back to our estate. I now sat facing him and his wife, Julianne, in his quiet office, with all the servants having been cleared out of the room. Julian was staring daggers at me with her narrow green eyes. You had an entire year to prepare, she said. Should you not have made arrangements ahead of time for Lady Bridget to refuse you instead? She was surely deeply wounded that you would turn her down in public when you yourself were the one to propose. Do you not even remember why you defended her against Lord Hashut? Was it not to protect the very honor you have now worked to undermine? I gritted my teeth. My intention had never been to hurt Bridget. I had thought that she would accept my proposal, and that would be that. Never did I think she would suddenly impose such a bold prerequisite, especially with everyone watching us. I thought we had agreed that I only needed to increase my mana capacity. I never thought she would suddenly force a new condition on me then and there. My eyes had widened in shock when Bridget asked me to move to Ilgner with her, and it was then that I saw Lady Elvira watching me with a slight smile. The moment I saw the look in her dark brown eyes, I heard her voice in my head. You certainly know much about Rosemine, don't you, Daniel? Oh, here we go. Yeah, if he left for Ilgner with Bridget, that is a loose end. Someone knows that he was Lady Rosemine's guard knight, and they could try to capture him and get information out of him. Even try and use torture to get that information. So yeah. It was a question she had asked me prior to Lady Rosemine's baptism when she and the Knight Commander summoned me to ask whether I would continue serving as her guard knight. Lord Ferdinand and the Knight Commander had then warned me to, in their words, think carefully and understand the significance of someone who knows so much about Rosemine resigning from serving as her guard. I couldn't quit serving her when she had allowed me to be her guard knight out of the kindness of her heart, and it was precisely because I knew her secrets and remained loyal to her that a lay noble like me has been given such an important role in the first place. Tragically, this was the very same reason that her guardians would never let me leave. Yeah, he couldn't have gone to Ilgner even if he wanted to. I was more surprised than anyone when she asked me to come to Ilgner. What? Hold on, are you saying that you expected not to marry into Ilgner, but for Lady Bridget to marry into our family? My brother asked incredulously. I nodded a little confused. Bridget and I are Lady Rosemine's guard knights. Would it not be unthinkable for the both of us to leave the nobles' quarter at the same time? It simply wasn't an option for me to quit being a guard knight, and Bridget was staying in the Night Storm precisely because she couldn't remain in Ilgner. To me, it made perfect sense that we would stay in the nobles' quarter after getting married. No, what's unthinkable is that you ever thought of such a thing. Lady Rosemine certainly does favor you, but you are a lay noble who everyone thinks should quit his position as soon as possible, and Lady Bridget is Geeb Ilgner's little sister. In what world would you not be marrying into her family? Who would waste that one chance to rise in status from a lay noble to a med noble? It was then that I realized I understood things differently than from other lay nobles. They shifted factions constantly based on trends and happenings, but I was the odd one out, locked into my position due to secrets that I couldn't tell anyone. So you mean to say that everyone thought my proposal was founded on the idea I would marry into Ilgner? Of course, it would have been beyond us to take Lady Bridget into our own estate, my brother said flatly, leaving no room for argument. Julian looked at me with an absolutely baffled expression. Could it be that you intended to have a men noble like Bridget lower her status to that of a lay noble to marry you? How in the world did you expect to live in the noble's quarter after that? I was stunned into silence for a moment. My previous engagement had ended up getting cancelled, but I had at least gotten halfway through the preparation phase before then. She wouldn't have been able to stay in the night storm, so I planned to rent a home in the nobles' quarter after our wedding, I explained. It wouldn't get in the way of us going to the temple and castle for work, and we would each have one attendant, so it wouldn't be too different from Bridget's current situation. Both my brother and Julian brought their hands to their foreheads in disbelief. Your previous fiancé was a lay noble, remember? Would you really force the med noble little sister of a Geeb to live like that, my brother asked. Julian nodded in agreement. That would make it difficult for Lady Bridget to ask her family for help with matters related to her marriage and eventual childbirth, would it not? And it would certainly not be similar to her life in the dorm. I blinked in surprise. The two of them had helped me with my marriage before, so I hadn't at all expected them to react so negatively to this. And you can't even tell them why! You can't even tell them that you can't leave Lady Rosemine's service because you know too much. Daniel, I think being so friendly with the Med Nobles and Arch Nobles serving as Lady Rosemine's guards has blinded you to how significantly a Med Noble marrying down into a Lay Noble family truly is, Julian said with a sigh. She went on to explain what life after marriage was like for a woman. Socializing remained their primary endeavor, just as it was before marriage, but they had to socialize based on the status of their house. One's status changed depending on their marriage, so Lady Bridget would be forced to live as a lay noble, Julian summarized. She would no longer be able to remain friends with those she had been equal to before, and when visiting her home province, she would be expected to bow in subservience to her family and relatives. Daniel, a land-owning med noble marrying a lay noble who isn't even the head of his house, is just as significant as you marrying into a rich commoner family, my brother added. I tried putting myself into that position. As a commoner, I would no longer be able to freely meet with my family, having to instead send word ahead of time, and I wouldn't be allowed to act as their equals. Just how much a person was distanced from their friends and family of another status became even clearer when I remembered the way Lady Rosemine was forced to interact with those from the lower city. But while she had gone up in a higher status, Bridget would have gone down. As I was just a bachelor and a second son, my brother had always dealt with our relatives, which meant I hadn't thought very hard about what Bridget's life would be like after marriage. It's true that I didn't think things through enough, but Bridget became a guard knight to support her family, since canceling her engagement with Lord Hoshett made it difficult for her to stay in Ilgner. She herself said that strengthening her bond with Lady Rosemine in the Nobles' Quarter was important for her home province, and so I never thought she would want to return there after getting married. I had thought Bridget would be happier living in the Nobles' Quarter, continuing to get Lady Rosemine's support, through me serving as her guard knight. My hand still clenched on my lap started to tremble. Did she not already solve the problem by securing Ilgner's involvement in the expanding printing industry? It is only natural that her thoughts would shift to getting a husband and growing the Geeb's family as much as possible to help support Ilgner's future. According to my brother, Bridget canceling her engagement to Lord Hoshett had led to all the lay nobles supporting Geeb Ilgner leaving the province, meaning there was almost no nobles in Ilgner at the moment. The Geeb's family and the few remaining nobles were banding together to survive, and since their highest priority was getting more noble support, they wanted Bridget and her husband to grow their numbers. Your marriage was accepted by Geeb Ilgner despite your lay noble status precisely because you are Lady Rosemine's guard knight, are not of an opposing faction, and are not the head of your house. He had originally planned for Lord Hoshett to marry into the family, so we can guess they always intended for you to do the same. You sure know a lot about Ilgner, brother. Our house would be tied to them if you married into the family. It's only natural that I would learn what I could about them. The real question is, why you evidently never thought of all this despite having been the one to propose. Surely you spent the past year learning something about Ilgner, no? In reality, I hadn't learned a thing. Idiot! Daniel! Why are you an idiot? Are you that blinded by love that you never even thought to research into the family you were marrying into? Whether she was marrying into your family or you were marrying into her family, it didn't matter. You should have learned something about her home. I was completely unaware that Lord Hoshett had intended to marry into their family, that Ilgner had fallen into disarray after Bridget's marriage was cancelled, and that they were suffering such a serious noble shortage. When I visited Ilgner with Lady Rosemine, I did notice that there were exceedingly few nobles, but I didn't realize why that was. Nor did it occur to me that Bridget wanted to return home, I said, and as the words left my mouth, I remembered something, the time Bridget had asked me what I thought about Ilgner. Could she have asked that with me marrying into her family in mind? Upon hearing me respond positively, she had beamed with delight and sincerely accepted my proposal. We were both trembling with joy over our hearts having connected, but it seemed we had misunderstood each other even that early on. I didn't want to believe it. I shook my head, trying to drive away that spine-chilling thought. I am a lay noble risen to the position of a guard knight due to Lady Rosemine's good graces. I cannot quit my post without her permission, nor can I leave the noble's quarter. Bridget should have known that from working with me, I said, trying to convince myself at the same time. My brother's eyes widened with surprise. Ah, I see. You are in a position that most lay nobles would never find themselves in. The very idea that someone should have known your feelings, however, is nothing short of arrogance. Even as your family and someone who knows the circumstances behind your employment, I did not consider this. Everyone judges things based on their own perspectives. Yeah, I think his brother even knows the situation that Daniel's in. But his wife does not, I think. Bridget had interpreted things based on her own thoughts, whereas I interpreted things based on mine. As a result, neither of us had truly understood each other. My brother, who had been staring at me instantly, broke into a bemused smile. Daniel, you certainly have worked harder than anyone expected. You increased your mana capacity to the point that you could feasibly propose to a med noble, and while you maintain that this was thanks to Lady Rosemine having taught you her compression method, increasing one's capacity is no simple task. As your brother, I am proud of what you have accomplished, but that is still not good enough. Getting married takes time, or takes more. My heart wrenched at his remark. I gritted my teeth and lowered my eyes to think I had come so close. I didn't want to accept that this failure was my own fault, that I hadn't been good enough. Well, it's not that you hadn't been good enough, it's that the fact that, one, you didn't want to move to Ilgner, and because you wanted to remain in service of Lady Rosemine, well, because you kind of have to, considering you know too much, and the fact that you probably would have been looking over your shoulder the entire time you were in Ilgner, worried about someone coming to silence you. An equivalent mana capacity is the bare minimum you need. Not even fellow lay nobles can get married on mana and feelings alone. You two spent an entire year with the proposal in mind, and yet neither of you managed to deduce there was a line between you that could never be crossed. Why didn't y'all just talk about, like, what you planned after you got married, where you were going to live? That's one of the big things you should have talked about before you went and proposed again. Oh my god. This is on both of y'all. Y'all should have talked about all this. His words stabbed into my heart one after another. I had worked desperately over the past year to increase my capacity as soon as possible, or as much as possible, believing that was all I needed to do for Bridget to accept my proposal. But this ignorance meant that I hadn't considered the marriage carefully enough. Marriage and love are not the same. For a couple to succeed in marriage, what's important is not the love that blooms between them, but rather their ability to live together. Lady Bridget and your visions of the future were simply incompatible. It would have been hard enough for you to live together given your difference in status, but with the two not even having understood each other, marriage would have proven impossible. A tense silence hung in the air. Where would we live after marriage? What circumstances were we both grappling with? Bridget and I hadn't once discussed these basic matters. What did y'all... I still say y'all are both at fault for this. What should I have done? Could we have worked things out if we just spoken about them ahead of time? Yes, you possibly could have. Maybe, but at the same time, I don't know if you still could have, even if you had. Because, like I said, Daniel knows too much, and Bridget doesn't even know those circumstances. So, he couldn't have told her all that, because if he could, she would have understood, why he couldn't leave Lady Rosemine as a guard knight, and maybe they could have worked something out. Maybe. I still say maybe, because I'm not entirely sure. If y'all have any idea on this, let me know. If so, what should I have said to her? I racked my brain trying to put the pieces together. If only Lady Rosemine were here. Perhaps then things would have gone differently. She had aided me in more ways than I could count, so there was no doubt in my mind that she would have helped me think this through. Maybe she could have gotten Lord Ferdinand and the commander involved. But would it have been right to ask for even more help after she already taught me her compression method? Neither Bridget nor my brother knew this, but Lady Rosemine was like, oh, he doesn't know this. He just knows that... He just knows the cover story. Okay. But Lady Rosemine was a commoner who had allowed herself to be adopted by the Archduke to protect her lower city family. She ultimately wasn't in a position where she could defy the wills of her guardians, and me giving her a request that she couldn't grant would only hurt her young heart. What kind of guard knight would do that to the one they serve? I mean, you could have asked the Ferdinand and the commander anyway about this whole situation. They could have probably given you some advice without getting Rosamund involved. I questioned myself over and over, digging as deep as I could until I finally reached the conclusion that it was impossible for me and Bridget and I to be together. Oh, I feel so bad for them. A heavy sigh escaped me as I looked back up, only to find that Julian had since left. Just my brother remained, sipping from a glass of wine as he watched me. Did you find an answer you're satisfied with? He asked, a warm look in his eyes as he poured a glass for me as well. I accepted it from him and took a sip. The wine tingled and burned my throat. It seems the goddess of binding did not bless me after all. No matter how hard I think about it, I can't ever see us getting together, not when I can't quit my post as guard knight and Bridget is so dedicated to Ilgner. I see. In that case, be sure to apologize deeply to Lady Bridget. Regardless of your circumstances, you proposed to a men noble in public, and then refused her despite being a lay noble yourself. As your brother, I will apologize to Geeb Ilgner as well, my brother explained before sighing as though a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. To be honest, I am just glad that Lady Bridget questioned whether you would be willing to join her family before accepting your proposal. If she had accepted without either of you noticing your misunderstanding, the wounds would have been much deeper when reality came to light. Had our engagement been confirmed, it would have ceased being a problem between the two of us and turned into one that involved our entire families. My brother was the head of our family, and he wanted to avoid conflict with Geeb Ilgner more than anything else. I just wasn't paying enough attention to either other people. Marriage wasn't something that affected only the two directly involved, and by letting my emotions run wild, I hadn't given those around me even the most basic considerations. No, you did not. I met with Bridget in the temple the next day. It was painfully embarrassing, but better than having to talk to her at the night training grounds with a bunch of nobles watching. Forgive me, Bridget. When you said you couldn't return to Ilgner, I accepted it without question. I never even tried to find out Ilgner's circumstances or whether you did one day hope to return after all. No, the fault is all mine for not realizing that your position prevents you from leaving the nobles' quarter. It took my brother pointing it out directly for me to understand. If only I had noticed sooner, she replied with a sad smile. At least you guys understand each other now. Too late, though. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Neither of us had understood the situation until those we knew spelled it out for us. My brother was right. Thank goodness we had found this out before the marriage and not after. Daniel, can we truly not leave Lady Rosamund's side? Bridget asked, her amethyst eyes gleaming with a familiar determination. She didn't want to give up yet, nor did she want me to. My heart begged me to move mountains for her, but my brain reminded me that no matter what happened, our love simply couldn't be possible. Bridget, is leaving Ilgner truly not an option for you? I asked. Perhaps it was cowardly of me to respond to her question with yet another question, but my heart was screaming for me to ask it. I couldn't give up yet. If only she could stay in the nobles' quarter, then everything would work, but she would go down in status if that was the case. Our eyes met, and it was clear we both still had strong feelings for each other. After a lengthy period of silence, Bridget let out a slow sigh and lowered her gaze. When she looked up again, I could tell from the gleam in her eyes that a rejection was coming. I am family to Geeb Ilgner. I became a guard knight solely to aid my home, and so I cannot live in the noble's quarter as a lay noble. I seek only a marriage that will benefit Ilgner. I could practically hear the goddess of binding forever severing the thread that joined us. The strength drained from my body, and I gave a weak smile nonetheless. It is a bit rude for me to ask, but do you have someone else? Lady Elvira spoke to my brother, and is due to introduce me to someone for her faction. We need to hurry if I am to marry before I'm 20, so she told me to resign from my post as guard knight sooner rather than later. Huh. At the very least, you won't have to feel awkward seeing me in the temple or at the training ground, she said, with another sad smile before turning her back to me. May we both meet the one tied to us by Lebeskil, the goddess of binding threads. The day after I said my final goodbyes to Bridget, it was training day for the Archducal family's guard knights. Just thinking about how all my colleagues would antagonize me for refusing to marry a med noble despite my position as a lay noble made my stomach hurt. I could feel the stress building up inside of me as I arrived at the training grounds where I found the Knight Commander, Lord Cardstead, and Lord Bonifacius waiting for me. The former wore a sympathetic smile while the latter was punching the air with enthusiasm. You're a good man, Daniel, Lord Bonifacius shouted. It takes a strong heart to have that kind of loyalty. I'm honored. I had been petrified with fear over how I would be treated, but it seemed that my bosses actually held a great deal of respect for my decision to prioritize loyalty over marriage. Lord Cardstead was nodding along with the exceptionally pleased Lord Bonifacius, seeming to understand my situation completely. It was a big relief to know that the training grounds weren't filled with scornful people. I moved. As a show of respect for your loyalty, I'll train you even harder, Lord Bonifacius declared. To me, Daniel. Please go easy on me. But of course, Lunabowder Fascist had never gone easy on anyone in his life. My days of suffering, both a broken heart and a broken body, continued until the day Lady Rosemine woke up. Really? What the fuck? What the fuck? One handful of a chef. Yet another heavy sigh broke the silence. Could you give it a rest already? Sheesh. I furrowed my brow in annoyance, which earned me a worried glance from Nicola. Ella, she began. I'm fine. Could you wash these fish up for me? For the past few days, a heavy atmosphere had hung over the kitchen that made it uncomfortable to say or do just about anything. I gave instructions to Nicola, then looked at the one responsible for the awkwardness. It was Hugo, hunched over with dead eyes as he stirred a pot. I mean, I understand why he's depressed, but even so, come on. Well, problems had started when the Offmer Company came asking for ways to expand the Italian restaurant's menu. They wanted at least one new recipe for the summer when they received more customers from outside the city. We normally would have asked Benno to speak to Lady Rosemine for us, but she was going to be asleep for a whole nother year. Fran had shot them down fast and told them to think of something themselves, but Todd, the Italian restaurant chef, hadn't managed to think of any good ideas. In fact, when Hugo had gone back to his home in the lower city, Todd had clung to him in tears, asking whether he knew anything about Lady Rosemine's recipes he could share. Unable to refuse the request of an old work buddy, Hugo started to think of new recipes, but in the meantime, the Offner Company determined that Todd couldn't handle this himself, and so they asked the Guildmaster's personal chef Lace to think of some as well. I don't know what had gone down between Hugo and Lace when he went to the Italian restaurant to tell Todd his new recipes, but I did know that a competition had been organized by the time he came back. They were going to duke it out, and whoever made the better recipe would have theirs used in the restaurant. Lady Rosemine liked pretty weird foods, so even with the magic contract limiting what recipes we could share, Hugo and I had plenty of ideas from our time working as her personal chefs. So he decided to challenge the competition with an original recipe of ours that she had loved. However, he ended up losing to Lace anyway. Hugo had been depressed ever since. He sadly hung his head even while in the middle of work, with his poor posture and distant gaze making him seem hardly alive. He usually looks so cool in the kitchen, but this was just pathetic. Hang on. 15 pages to the end. But even that's not going to be part of it. Part of it's not going to be there. It's going to be the afterword, I think. He let out another heavy sigh. How many times was that now? I don't know what I could do to cheer him up the day after he lost, but at this point I was fed up with it. So you lost once, what's the big deal? All you have to do is win next time. While I was angrily chopping up the fish up, Nicola finished washing the rest of them and sent a worried glance Hugo's way. He seemed to notice that as he turned his gloomy face to her and gave a weak smile, no doubt hoping she'd console him. The moment I saw that smile, something inside of me snapped. I dropped my knife, stomped over to Hugo, and punched him on the arm. I get that you're sad about losing to Lace, but how long are you going to be a little baby about it? Just looking at you like this annoys me. What? Why so harsh? Hugo stammered, widening his eyes in surprise, then grimacing at my unexpected rant. But I was the one who should have been grimacing. Not only was he damaging my opinion of him by being such a loser, now he was trying to be all cozy with Nicola right in front of me. If you want to try to beat Lace again, I'll do everything I can to help you, but being this much of a sad sack in the kitchen is just depressing. Your sour feelings are going to make the food taste terrible. Just take some time off until you're back on your feet. Hate to say it, but you're just in our way right now, Hugo. I glared at him, and Hugo glared right back, his lips burnt into a frown. He then looked to Nicola in hopes of getting some support, but she was just watching us with eyes like saucers. Sorry, but you're not gonna exploit Nicola's kindness here. I grinned and went back to Nicola's side, where I picked up the knife back up and chopped the rest of the fish before adding it into a bowl filled with water. Fran was saying we've still got a year until Lady Rosemine wakes up, you know. Nicola and I can handle cooking for the orphanage just fine by ourselves, so there's nothing stopping you from taking some time off. Right, Nicola? Don't you think it'd be better for Hugo if he rested until he was feeling better? His depression's gonna seep into the food. Nicola placed a finger on her chin, tightly knitting her brow in thought. Well, we can't really have the food start tasting bad. I'll ask Fran to let Hugo go back to the lower city. No, Nicola, wait a second, Hugo exclaimed. I'm fine, I'm all better now. We don't need to tell Fran anything, okay? Please? Really? You're better now? Nicola asked, blinking with surprise. Hugo nodded over and over again, now looking especially panicked. Yep, let me get back to cooking, he said, swinging his arm like an exaggerated windmill. I couldn't help but laugh if he tried to distract Nicola with the thought of delicious food. Nicola was raised in the temple, so she didn't quite understand how some things worked. If she had told Fran that Hugo needed some time away because his food tasted bad, he would be considered a failure of a personal chef and fired. There was no point paying a chef who couldn't make good food, after all. But that wasn't something Nicola really considered, perhaps due to her upbringing. All she focused on was making and eating tasty food. "Nicola, can you handle the pot?" Hugo asked. "Ella wants you done with the fish to come help me over here." I couldn't tell whether my yelling had actually whipped him into shape or if he was just faking it as well. But it looked like Hugo had kicked aside his depression. He picked up a knife to start peeling some potatofuls, apparently intending to make something fancy to both distract Nicola and show that he had fully recovered. I drew some water from a jug and cleaned my knife while Hugo plopped down into a chair next to me in the corner of the kitchen. He grabbed a potataful out of a bag fully packed with them and started to peel it. "Come on, Ella, I'll make you pay for this," he grumpily muttered at me under his breath. "Or curse you, Ella." I waved a hand dismissively. "You can try, but I'm not scared of someone who lost a lace and then tried to cozy up to Nicola for comfort." "Wait, never mind, I can take it back. Forget this ever happened." "Nope. I don't want to forget a thing about the guy I like. So I chuckled at his expense and started peeling a potataful as well. Hugo spat through his one like he wasn't depressed at all anymore. Life had returned to his eyes and he was sitting up straight. In fact, he was looking kind of manly again. "There we go. This is the Hugo I want to see at work." I hummed to myself as I continued to peel, earning me a raised eyebrow from Hugo. "You sure are in a good mood," he murmured out of annoyance. Well, it was more awkwardness than annoyance. He was aware that he had been killing the mood in the kitchen and was now trying to cover for it. The fact that I thought that was cute probably showed us just how bad my taste in men was. I dropped my peeled potataful into a bowl and shot Hugo a smile as I picked up another. "Don't feel so down. There's going to be another competition at the end of summer, right? All you have to do is beat Lace there. We should definitely use some mushrooms for the autumn menu. We could cook them through with butter, freshen them up with vinegar, or..." "Ella, do you actually think I can beat Lace?" Hugo asked, sounding like he had suddenly lost all confidence in himself. "Yep," I replied without missing a beat. Hugo's eyes widened in disbelief, but I really didn't understand why he was feeling so unsure. "I mean, you lost last time because you were just too good at making food Lady Rosemary likes. Not because you're a bad chef. You can win next time for sure." I'm surprised you could say that when Lace bashed the dish so hard. Hugo was starting to hunch over again, likely remembering all the things Lace had told him, that the recipes were innovative but much too salty, that he should have added Resha or Petsis to draw out the flavor, and all sorts of other minor quibbles. "Okay, quit it, that's enough." I thrust a peeled potataful right in Hugo's face to stop him from hunching forward any further. He grimaced, and this time I returned to grimace myself. We'd finally gotten him to cheer up. I didn't want him to get himself all depressed again. "You dominate any competition about making food Lady Rosemary enjoys, but the one you lost was about a recipe for the Italian restaurant, right? Your problem was making a meal with Lady Rosemary's taste in mind. I mean, she likes her food salty, so..." Hugo had lost the competition because he was too focused on Lady Rosemary's own preferences. It was the job of a personal chef to learn what their boss liked, slowly change their seasoning to match their tastes, and not use ingredients they were too fond of. As such, the food they made was catered to the wants of a single person, not an entire restaurant. "Todd asked for some new recipes from Lady Rosemary, so that's what you brought him, right? That's why you lost." "Yeah, I guess it's the rich merchants who decide on what tastes better. Only makes sense. Lace would win when she just took normal noble food and added consommé to strengthen the flavor." The Italian restaurant's menu didn't need anything too unique. What mattered was having a traditional, slightly modified recipe that could be made with easily purchasable ingredients and seasonings. Guess I'll need to make something that appeals to more people than just Lady Rosemary. The restaurant not having an ice room like we do didn't help either. I couldn't use most of the summer recipes I'm used to making. True, a bunch of Lady Rosemary's summer recipes use things that can only be kept in an ice room. Lady Rosemary was weak to the heat, and her poor health meant she was often quick to lose her appetite. As a result, she mainly wanted light meals in the summer or slightly chilly things that could be eaten without much effort. But the ice rooms were made of magic tools, so it wasn't possible for the Italian restaurant to rely on them. So basically, I'm just thinking too much like a noble, huh? I used to think about what commoners eat. Yeah, I'll have more options for autumn recipes. Now that Hugo was facing the reason he lost head on, his mood started to brighten even without any efforts. I saw his lips rise up into a motivated grin, which made me grin myself. There we go, that's the face I kinda like to see. Satisfied that he was once again wearing the expression I most loved to see on him, I got back to peeling my next potataful. Hugo, I asked, noticing that he was just sitting there in a daze with his knife. "You've stopped working. Come on, peel, peel, peel!" He quickly snapped back to reality and started peeling again, but it seemed like his heart wasn't properly in it. For once, he was actually peeling slower than I was, and the fact that he kept glancing my way was making me really curious. "Is there something else you're worried about, Hugo? You don't need to think of a new recipe for the competition right away, you know. There's still plenty of time." "Yeah, right, I'll handle it later," he murmured. He was looking right at me, but didn't sound like he was paying much attention. I think he's starting to realize he likes you! Whatever he was thinking about, it must have been important. What is it this time? Gosh, he sure is a handful. Was there anything else that Hugo had to worry about? Nothing came to mind. I pursed my lips in thought, trying to figure it out while I continued to peel. Hey, Ella. Yeah, I asked casually, leaning forward in anticipation of another discussion about a dinner menu or something. Want to get married? Just how I asked! Want to get married? No beating around the bush for this guy. It was so... Did I hear that? Mishear that? It was so sudden that my mind went blank. There was such a slim connection between his question and what we had just been talking about that I couldn't believe my ears. I just stared at him, blinking in shock. Well, you always cheer me up, and I was thinking it might be nice to spend my life with you, he mumbled awkwardly before slapping a hand against his forehead. His ears had gone red along with the rest of his face. Man, why did I say that? If you don't want to, go ahead and tell me. I'm used to it. Hugo grabbed the half-peeled potato bowl out of my hands, quickly finished it, then stood up with the bowl of potato balls to flee to the other side of the kitchen. Without even thinking, I reached out and grabbed his arm to stop him. Actually, I'm glad you asked. I like you too, so I'm really glad, but could we at least talk about this before when Nicola's not around? Nicola didn't have enough common sense to read the mood and give us some space. Instead, she was staring at us closely like a kid interested in a conversation between adults. I naturally couldn't talk about romance with her watching like that. Right, good point, Hugo stuttered. I'll bring it up again after work. Right. And so, he proposed to me again on our way home. My love for him had finally borne fruit, but that didn't make him any less of a handful. I can't believe this, he complained. Waiting for Lady Rosemary means I don't get to be center stage for the next Star Festival either. He had gone to Fran for permission to get married, only to be told that no decision can be made until Lady Rosemary woke up. Hugo was still agonizing over that, since he had been beyond excited to finally participate in the Star Festival as a groom. I took his hand and consolingly patted him on the back as we walked away. He stopped grumbling once I intertwined my fingers with his callous as they were from holding knives all day. Anyway, Hugo, let's forget about the Star Festival and start thinking about that cooking competition that's coming up. You want to beat Lace this time, right? Yep. And I'm gonna. You think of a dessert for me, Ella. Something that uses Ruffles, he said, looking down at me happily. His brown eyes were filled with newfound motivation, and the moment I saw them, I knew he would win this time for sure. There we go, the afterword. Here we go. Wait, the cover art, what? Oh, the fat is wanting to hug her. Poor thing. Poor thing. When a fascist followed his heart, just give her a hug, and then he'd kill her. It's like, ugh, you're squeezing me too hard, I'm dead. And her soul flies out. Just like, I'm dead. Jessica's just following them. Oh my god. And her hugging onto Lutz, that's so cute. I want to hug you. And both of them just wanting to hug her. What the fuck was that? What the fuck is that? Please tell me! What the fuck? That's terrifying! What is that supposed to be? What the fuck? Who is that supposed to be? Someone tell me! Oh, poor Rosemary. I just want to see her wake up already. Come on. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.